Alright, hello and welcome to another discussion-y thing. I say another one even though I haven't done these in a hot minute. It's been a while, especially since I've done one with my face in it, because you people like to see this, I guess. But today we're going to be talking about accessibility, which is something that I think is very important and should really be considered for deck building and just card choice and things like that. Now, accessibility is basically the ease of access to a card. Basically, how easy is it to get this card out of deck to wherever you want it, into your hand, into your grave, banished, however you want to get this card there. But that's something important because it really affects the consistency of your strategy. And I actually have some examples on Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro that we'll go ahead and get into now. Alright, so moving over here onto Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro, that obvious jump in audio quality is going to be fantastic, but one of the best examples of accessibility in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is actually normal monsters, interestingly. Them being inherently weaker and lacking, effects that make other cards stronger, actually gives them a bit of an edge in the fact that Konami had to kind of push a little bit of more of extra support in the form of spells and traps to actually make them more accessible. Occasionally with monsters too as well. So obviously some of the most famous cases, we have Rescue Rabbit up here, obviously specials them from deck, Unexpected Die, also them grabbing out of deck, and that's mainly one of the most important forms of accessibility, is just being able to grab things directly out of the deck, especially special summoning them to the field, where now with links, even if you want it engraved, you could just special it to the field, link with it, get it engraved anyway. Specialing from deck is pretty much the most important one, and as you can see, normals have some very decent ways to do that there. Unexpected Die, only, mostly good turn one, but also works later in the game as well, if they clear your board. Rescue Rabbit just being an amazing card overall. But that's not where it ends. They also have a lot of other cards. These are just a few examples here and there. This is a card first, Faustian Bargain, which I really like, which actually basically lets you tribute a monster in your opponent's side of the field to go ahead and summon a level 4 low normal monster. Painful Decision obviously being amazing and setting up the grave and adding one to hand, having some dual accessibility there. Dark Factory of Mass Production, allowing you to add cards from grave back to hand. Silent Doom and Swing of Memories just being kind of themed normal monster reborns. As you can see, it is a very, very accessible type. But that's just going over some of the good points of accessibility for a certain kind of card type. So one good example is actually looking at a very accessible type in general, but the slight difference between one being a normal and one not being a normal. So an interesting kind of comparison is between Galaxy Eyes Photon Dragon and Blue Eyes White Dragon. And what really makes the difference between those two cards is the fact that Blue Eyes doesn't have an effect, which in the way that both the decks function is actually better. A lot of times in a Galaxy Eyes deck, you can go ahead and activate Shrine, but it just puts him in grave and nothing else, so it's less deck thinning. He usually gets special summoned back in defense off of the way most of the Galaxy card effects work, so you can't even resolve his effect, so it'd honestly be better if he was vanilla, which it basically would be because you could send multiple cards off of Dragon Shrine, you could set up him and a Cloud Dragon in grave for a free attachment, you'd be able to special summon him back off of Silver's Cry, Silent Doom, Swing of Memories, you couldn't use any of those because they're level 4 lower. But you get the gist of the idea. It's just a lot more accessible. And Blue Eyes was kind of built around that, and Galaxy Eyes lacking the accessibility of normals and kind of the clauses and things that go along with those actually really does hurt it. Obviously, Dragons being accessible, they still have Return, they still have Silver's Cry, and then again, just some more examples at the end here of like Darks having Allure and level 8s having Trade-In, not specifically grabbing your cards out of deck, or specific consistency cards right there, but overall more powerful cards, more consistency cards that you can run because your deck has those certain types, which falls in a similar category, but not exactly the same. Now, accessibility is something that can help or hurt a deck, obviously, and I have some examples up here. Now, Black Luster Soldier, Super Soldier, in combination with the effects granted by Beginning Night and Evening Twilight Night, is actually a very insane card. It can attack twice, it does burn damage when it destroys something, it can banish 2 monsters on the field and 1 card from your opponent's hand, which is absolutely insane. But it has the inherent brickiness of rituals, which has actually No, it's any Blackluster Soldier monster, so it's not searchable off of pre-prep. So it actually lacks the accessibility of pre-prep, is lacking accessibility in the fact that these cards aren't super searchable, only being by Rhoda, which is at 1, and one of them's needed in hand to complete the full kind of combo of synthesis there. So it's a deck that has a lot of power, but because it lacks some of the accessibility, it's less consistent. Now, an interesting one is Dark Magician, because Dark Magician actually contains a lot of consistency cards, but kind of falls into the same realm of Ritual deck, where you need cards to set up, you need cards to summon the monsters from your hand or from deck, things like that. Obviously, your ideal setup in Dark Magician, and this is just the bare minimum, is one way to special it, a circle, and a Dark Magician in hand or grave, depending on which card you have, Navigation or Soul. And that's something where even though the deck is actually very accessible and a lot of the cards are searchable and you have a lot of searchers, it has such a high setup ceiling that sometimes that's even not enough. And getting on to one of the best examples of accessibility in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! We have Zoodiac. Now, obviously, Zoodiac is insane. It's one of the most powerful decks we've ever seen, and is hit with good reason. However, on its own, Zoodiac Dryden, which was kind of the main card, isn't really that powerful. It's a once per turn quick effect pop, which is definitely a good effect, but overall it isn't really that overpowered. That's something we see a lot of. Obviously, Masterpiece has that, and it's a lot better than Dryden and still around. However, what really pushed Zoodiac over the edge was the accessibility of the deck. Any single one of your main deck monsters could turn into any of these XYZ options up here, and then they could all turn into another one. So every card accessed your entire extra deck. You had ways to draw cards through Thoroughblade, you had special summoning from deck off of Barrage, which could keep itself face up and keep going from there, and just overall the one card XYZ making things so accessible, and just the way they could stack and everything when you play cards like Shuffle Reborn, just the accessibility and sheer crazy consistency of the deck pushed it over the top. And to go ahead and try to bring all this together, I'm going to get into a specific case here, which actually harpens back to my old days of playing my Rank 4 or Jank 4 spam deck. Now, I made a choice that a lot of people didn't like, and I didn't see a lot in a Rank 4 deck, which actually that I chose to use a vanilla monster, specifically Mystical Elf, for some specific card choices I had there. Now, Mystical Elf is objectively worse than, say, Chocolate Magician Girl over here, just a kind of random example that I brought up. It doesn't have an effect, you know, it has a bigger defense, but that's really not important because just a big attack is better than a big defense. But Mystical Elf, being a normal monster and having its stat line, just made it more accessible for other cards. It gave me the access of the one card XYZ of Rescue Rabbit. It gave me access to Unexpected Die, which did some deck thinning and got me a free monster on board. It was a Spellcaster, which gave me access to the main card of the deck, Gigabyte. Now that's what's really the basis of the monsters, it just had to be a Spellcaster. But this is one case where a vanilla monster not having an effect was actually better than an effect monster simply because it fit the necessary criteria and more. It was more accessible, let me deck thin more, I was able to get it out of grave more, which started my plays off super easily there. Just getting an Unexpected Die, letting you special a Gigabyte, you can search some stuff from there, you could search a Kage, then normal summon and go off, and it just really opened up plays better than any effect monster really would have, simply because of how easy it was to actually get the card out of the deck. But yes, this has been just a rather quick one here, nothing super deep or anything like that, just something that I've been thinking about recently, and I'm a little bit burnt out on Yu-Gi-Oh! And creating right now, so this was something easier for me to do. But yeah, just something a little smaller to consider in deck building, and something that could help out with some choices here and there, and again, just an overall kind of consistency effect at the end of the day. But anyway, usual plugs: Twitter, tweets about videos, random tweets about Yu-Gi-Oh! Discord, we talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! We have some duels. Patreon, if you like what I do, you can support me there. It'd be greatly appreciated, but you don't have to. But anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.